All right. Chapter 53. The Dactyls. Some say that while Rhea was bearing Zeus, she pressed her fingers into the soil to ease her pangs, and up sprang the dactyls, 5 females from her left hand and 5 males from her right. But it is generally held that they were living on Phrygian Mount Ida long before the birth of Zeus, and some say that the nymph Achael bore them in the Dactylian cave near Oaxus. The male dactyls were smiths and first discovered iron in nearby Mount Baracynthus, and their sisters, who settled in Samothrace, excited great wonder there by casting magic spells and taught Orpheus the goddess's mysteries. Their names are a well guarded secret. B. Others say that the males were the Cyrtes who protected Zeus's cradle in Crete, and that they afterwards came to Elis and raised the temple to propitiate, propitiate, propitiate Cronus. Their names were Hercules, Paeonus, Epimedes, Asius, and Asidus. Hercules, having brought wild olives from the Hyperborean to Olympia, set his younger brothers to run a race there, and thus the Olympic Games originated. It is also said that he crowned Paeonius, the victor, with a spray of wild olive, and that afterwards they slept in beds made from its green leaves. But the truth is that wild olive was not used for the victor's crown until the seventh Olympiad, when the Delphic oracle had ordered Iphitus to substitute it for the apple spray hitherto awarded as the prize of victory. C. Aesmon, Damnamenes, and Selmus are titles of the 3 eldest dactyls. Some say that Selmus was turned into iron as punishment for insulting Rhea. Footers. 1. The dactyls personify the fingers. In Hercules' Olympic race is a childish fable illustrated by drumming one's fingers on a table, omitting the thumb, when the forefinger always wins the race. But Orphic secret lore was based on a calendar sequence of magical trees, each allotted a separate finger joint in the sign language and a separate letter of the Orphic calendar alphabet, which seems to have been Phrygian in origin. Wild olive belongs to the top joint of the thumb, supposedly the seat of virility, and therefore called Hercules. This Heracles. Heracles. This Heracles was said to have had leaves growing from his body. Is it Hercules? Hercules. The system is recalled in the popular Western finger names. Example, fool's finger, which corresponds to Epimedes, the middle finger, and the physic finger, which corresponds to Iasus the fourth, and in the finger names of palmistry. Example, Saturn of Epimedes, Saturn having shown himself slow-witted in his struggle with Zeus, and Apollo, god of healing, for Iasus. The forefinger is given to Jupiter, or Zeus, who won the race. The little finger, Mercury's, or Hermes, is the magical one. Throughout primitive Europe, metallurgy was accompanied by incantations, and the smiths therefore claimed the fingers of the right hand as the dactyls, leaving the left to the sorceresses. 2. The story of Aesmon, Damnamenes, and Selmus, whose names refer to smithcraft, is another childish fable illustrated by tapping the forefinger on the thumb as a hammer and an anvil, and then slipping the tip of the middle finger between them as though it were a piece of red hot iron. Iron came to Crete through Phrygia from farther along the southern Black Sea coast, and Selmus, being a personification of smelted iron, will have been obnoxious to the great goddess Rhea, patroness of smiths, whose religious decline began with the smelting of iron and the arrival of the iron-weaponed Dorians. She had recognized only gold, silver, copper, lead, and tin as terrestrial ores, though lumps of meteoric iron were highly prized because of their miraculous origin, and one may have fallen on Mount Baracynthus. an unworked lump was found in a Neolithic deposit at Festus beside a squatting clay image of the goddess, seashells, and offering bowls. An early Egyptian iron is meteoric. It contains a high proportion of nickel and is nearly rust-proof. Selmus's insult to Hera gave the middle finger its name, Digita Impudicissa. 3. The Olympic Games originated in a foot race run by girls for the privilege of becoming the priestess of the moon goddess Hera. And since this event took place in the month Parthenos of the maiden, it seems to have been annual. When Zeus married Hera, when, that is, a new form of sacred kingship had been introduced into Greece by Achaeans, a second foot race was run by young men for the dangerous privilege of becoming the priestess's consort, son to her moon and thus king of Elis, just as Antaeus made his daughter's suitors race for her, following the example of Icarus and Danos. 4. The games were thereafter held every 4 years instead of annually, the girls' foot race being run at a separate festival either a fortnight before or a fortnight after the Olympian Games proper, and the sacred kingship conferred with the victor of the foot race at his marriage to the new priestess is recalled in the divine honors that the victory continued to bestow in classical times, having been wreathed with Hercules' or Zeus's olive, saluted as King Hercules, and pelted with leaves like a jack of green. He led the dance in a triumphal procession and ate sacrificial bull's flesh in the council hall. 5. The original prize, an apple or an apple spray, had been a promise of immortality when he was duly killed by his successor from Plutarch. Mentions that though a foot race was the sole contest in the original Olympic Games, a single combat also took place, which ended only in the death of the vanquished. This combat is mythologically recorded in the story that the Olympic Games began with a wrestling match between Zeus and Cronus for the possession of Elis, namely the midsummer combat between the king and his Tanist, and the result was a foregone conclusion. The Tanist came armed with a spear. 6. A scholast on Pindar, quoting Comarchus, shows that the Ilian New Year was reckoned from the full moon nearest to the winter solstice, and that a second new year began at midsummer. Presumably, therefore, the new Zeus Hercules, that is to say, the winner of the foot race, killed the old year Tanist, Cronus Epicles, at midwinter. Hence, Hercules first instituted the games and named the sepulchral hill of Cronus at a season when the summit was wet with much snow. 7. In ancient times, Zeus Hercules was pelted with oak leaves and given the apple spray at midsummer, just before being killed by his Tanist. He had won the royal wild olive branch at midwinter, the replacement of the apple by wild olive, which is the tree that drives away evil spirits, implied the abolition of this death combat and the conversion of the single year, divided into 2 halves, into a great year. This began at midwinter, when solar and lunar time coincided favorably for a sun and moon marriage, and was divided into 2 Olympiads of 4 years apiece, the king and his Tanist reigning successively or concurrently. Though by classical times the solar chariot race, for which the mythological authority of Pelops contests with Oenomaus for Diademia, had become the most important event in the games, it was still thought somehow unlikely to be pelted with leaves after a victory in the foot race, and Pythagoras advised his friends to compete in this event but not to win it. The victory ox eaten at the council hall was clearly a surrogate for the king, as at the Athenian Bouphonia festival. 8. Olympia is not a Mycenaean site, and the pre-Achaean myths are therefore unlikely to have been borrowed from Crete. They seem to be Pelasgian. Hold on. How do I turn this off?